The meeting room was full of officers from different species across the galaxy. They sat around a large curved table made of smooth white metal. Blue lights glowed softly from the ceiling. Screens covered the walls, showing maps of star systems and fleet positions. Commander Yira walked into the room with her head held high. She was tall and slender, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that missed nothing. Her people, the Valoran, were known for their sharp minds and careful planning. They had built their reputation on strategy, not strength. Yira had commanded ships for 40 years. She had never lost a battle. Today's meeting was about the joint military exercise with the Human Alliance. Yira did not hide her feelings about this. She thought it was a waste of time. She took her seat at the head of the table and looked around at the other officers. There were Valoran like herself, a few from the insect-like Crick species, and 2 tall Morath with their stone-gray skin. In the corner, sitting quietly by himself, was a human. Yira had seen humans before, but she had never worked closely with one. This human was male, with black hair cut short and a calm face that showed little emotion. He wore a simple dark uniform with no medals or marks of rank that she could see. His name, according to her datapad, was Taiho. He was assigned to her ship as a liaison officer. She did not want him there. The meeting began with reports about fleet movements and patrol routes. Yura listened carefully, taking notes and asking sharp questions. When the topic turned to the joint exercise, one of the Morath officers spoke up. "We should discuss combat protocols," he said in his deep, rumbling voice. "The humans have different methods. Their reputation in battle is notable." Yura made a sound of dismissal. "Their reputation is exaggerated." The room went quiet. The human in the corner did not react. He simply sat there, his hands folded on his lap. "Watching. Commander," the Morath said carefully. "The records show many instances of human combat effectiveness beyond what their physical abilities should allow." "Records can be wrong," Yura said. "Stories grow larger with each telling. I have studied humans. They are fragile creatures. Their bones break easily. Their skin tears with little pressure. They cannot see well in darkness. They cannot hear high frequencies. They live short lives and spend much of that time sleeping." She waved her hand as if pushing away something unimportant. "The stories about human fighters are propaganda. Nothing more." Another officer, a young Valoran named Dory, leaned forward. "But Commander, what about the Battle of Kara Station?" "A single human squad held off 200 Dravik warriors for 3 days. They had defensive positions and superior weapons," Yura said. "Any species could have done the same." "And the siege of New Manila?" Dory pressed. "Human civilians fought against a full invasion force with farming tools and kitchen knives. They won." Yura's dark eyes narrowed. "They got lucky. The enemy was overconfident and made mistakes. Luck is not a military strategy." She stood up and walked to the center of the room. Her voice was cold and clear. "Let me tell you what I see when I look at humans. I see a young species that has only been in space for a few hundred years. I see soft bodies that evolved on a single planet with gentle conditions. I see creatures ruled by emotions who make decisions based on feelings instead of logic." She turned and looked directly at the human in the corner. Taiho met her gaze without blinking. "The legends say humans can fight through wounds that would kill others. The legends say they feel no fear. The legends say they will die before they surrender." Yura's voice dripped with doubt. "I say these legends were created by species too embarrassed to admit they lost to inferior tactics." Still, Taiho said nothing. His face remained calm, almost peaceful. This annoyed Yura more than if he had argued with her. She wanted him to defend his species. She wanted to prove him wrong. "You have nothing to say?" she asked him directly. Taiho tilted his head slightly. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, and even. You are entitled to your opinion, Commander. I am here to assist, not to argue. A diplomatic answer, Ira said. Perhaps that is what humans are truly good at. Words instead of action. The meeting continued, but the tension remained. When it ended, the officers filed out. Taiho stood and walked toward the door. Ira stopped him. Liaison Officer Taiho. He turned and waited. You will be assigned to cargo inventory during our patrol, she said. Your skills will be more useful there than on the bridge. If this insult bothered him, he did not show it. Understood, Commander. He walked out without another word. Ira watched him go. She noticed something she had missed before. His hands were covered in old scars. Thin white lines crossed his knuckles and fingers. Burn marks dotted his wrists. She decided they were probably from accidents. Humans were clumsy, after all. 3 days later, the fleet departed for the outer rim. The journey was quiet. Ira ran drills and inspections. She pushed her crew hard, making sure every system worked perfectly. Her ship, the Valoran cruiser Starlight Mind, was the pride of the fleet. She would not let standards drop. She saw Taiho only occasionally. He worked in the cargo bays, organizing supplies and checking inventory. He did his job without complaint. The crew reported that he was polite but kept to himself. One evening, Ira walked through the lower decks on an inspection. She passed Cargo Bay 7 and heard voices inside. She stopped to listen. Is it true? A young Valoran crew member was asking. The stories about human soldiers? Which stories? Taiho's voice replied. The ones about pain. They say humans can ignore pain that would make other species pass out. There was a pause. Then Taiho spoke softly. We feel pain. Every human feels pain. But we learn to keep moving anyway. When you have something worth protecting, pain becomes just another obstacle, not a wall. Ira frowned and walked away. More propaganda, she thought. Pretty words that meant nothing. The patrol route took them near Dravek territory. The Dravik were dangerous. 8 limbs. Bodies covered in natural armor. They raided ships and took prisoners for sport. But they rarely attacked military vessels. Ira was not worried. She went to sleep that night, certain that the patrol would be uneventful. She would complete the mission, return the human to his people, and forget about this waste of time. She was wrong. The attack came at 3 hours past midnight, ship time. 7 Dravik raider ships appeared from the asteroid field, like ghosts rising from graves. Their weapons fired in perfect coordination. The first shot hit the Starlight Mind's main power core. Everything went dark. And in the silence that followed, Commander Ira learned that legends sometimes tell the truth. The emergency lights came on, bathing everything in a dim red glow. Alarms screamed through the corridors of the Starlight Mind. Ira felt the ship shake as another blast hit the hull. She ran to the bridge, her boots pounding against the metal floor. Officers rushed past her in both directions. Some were shouting orders. Others were shouting in fear. The calm discipline of her crew had shattered in seconds. When she reached the bridge, the scene was chaos. Smoke poured from a damaged console. Sparks flew from exposed wires in the ceiling. Her second officer, a veteran named Kieran, was trying to restore main power. Report, Ira commanded. 7 Dravik ships, Kieran said without looking up. They hit us with an EMP pulse. Main power is down. Weapons are offline. Shields are at 12% and falling. Communications? Dead. We cannot reach the rest of the fleet. Ira gripped the edge of her command chair. This was not possible. Dravik raiders did not attack military vessels. They preferred easy targets. Merchant ships. Transport vessels. Not armed cruisers. Another impact rocked the ship. This time, the sound was different. Closer. metal grinding against metal. "They are attaching boarding craft," Kieran said, his voice tight with fear. "Multiple points of contact. Decks 4, 7, and 12. Yira's blood went cold. The Dravik were coming aboard, Dodd. She had seen what Dravik did to prisoners. They did not kill quickly. They liked to take their time. They collected trophies from their victims. Fingers, eyes, teeth. "Security teams to all breach points," she ordered. "Seal the bridge. No one gets in or out until we restore power." The bridge doors closed with a heavy clang. Yira and her officers were trapped inside, watching through security cameras as the nightmare unfolded. The first Dravik came through the breach on Deck 4. It was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with 8 limbs that ended in curved claws. Its body was covered in plates of natural armor that could stop most energy weapons. 2 of its limbs carried bladed weapons that dripped with something dark and wet. Behind it came more, dozens of them. They moved through the corridors with terrible speed, their claws clicking against the floor. Yira's security teams met them with plasma rifles. The shots hit the Dravik and did almost nothing. The armor absorbed the energy. The creatures kept coming. The fighting was brutal and short. Yira watched her soldiers fall one by one. Some were killed instantly. Others were dragged away, screaming. The Dravik did not seem to care about losses. They pushed forward like a wave that could not be stopped. "Deck 4 is lost," Kieran whispered. "Deck 7 is lost," another officer reported moments later. Yira felt helpless. She was a commander without a ship to command. Her weapons were useless. Her crew was dying, and she could do nothing but watch. Then her eyes found the feed from Cargo Bay 7. At first, she did not understand what she was seeing. 3 Dravik had entered the bay. They were moving between the storage containers, hunting for survivors. In the corner of the screen, she saw movement. It was Taiho. He stepped out from behind a container, holding a maintenance torch in one hand and a metal pipe in the other. The torch was a simple tool used for cutting through damaged hull plates. The pipe was exactly that. A pipe. Neither was meant for combat. Yira almost laughed. The human was going to try to fight Dravik raiders with tools. He would die in seconds. "Foolish creature," she murmured. The first Dravik spotted Taiho and charged. It was fast, covering the distance in the time it took to blink. Its blade came down toward the human's head. Taiho was not there. He moved to the side at the last moment, and the blade cut only air. Before the Dravik could recover, Taiho swung the pipe with both hands. It hit the creature's leg joint, the only part of its body not protected by armor plates. The Dravik stumbled. Taiho did not wait. He drove the maintenance torch into the creature's throat, where the armor was thin. Blue flame shot through flesh. The Dravik fell. The other 2 attacked together. One came from the left, one from the right. There was no way to dodge both, so Taiho did not try to dodge. He met the one on the left first, taking its blade across his ribs to get close. Yira saw red blood spray from the wound. Human blood. Taiho did not stop. He grabbed the Dravik's weapon arm with his free hand and drove the pipe through its eye. The 3rd Dravik hit him from behind. Its claws raked across his shoulder, tearing through his uniform and the skin beneath. Taiho fell forward, landing on his hands and knees. Yira was sure it was over. The Dravik raised its blade for the killing strike, and Taiho lunged upward. He did not use the torch or the pipe. He used his teeth. He bit into the creature's ankle, finding the gap between armor plates, and tore. The Dravik screamed, a sound like breaking glass, and crashed to the floor beside him. Taiho crawled on top of it. His hands found its throat. He squeezed. It took a long time for the creature to stop moving. When Taiho finally stood, he was covered in blood. His blood. Their blood. It dripped from his hands and ran down his face. The wound on his ribs was deep. Yura could see something white inside it that might have been bone, but his eyes were clear. His hands were steady. He picked up a Dravik blade from the floor and tested its weight. Then he moved toward the door. "Where is he going?" Kieran asked. Yura could not answer. She could not look away from the screen. She switched camera feeds, following the human as he moved through the corridors. He found 2 more Dravik near a crew quarters. He killed them both. One he took from behind, driving the blade through a gap in its armor. The other turned to face him, and they fought for nearly a minute before Taiho found an opening and cut its throat. He was wounded again in the fight. A cut across his leg that made him limp. But he kept moving. On deck 7, he found survivors. 6 Valoran crew members hiding in a storage room. They were terrified, huddled together like children in a storm. Yura turned on the audio feed. "Can any of you fight?" Taiho asked. Silence. Then one of them, a young female named Pira, shook her head. "We are not warriors. We are engineers. We do not know how to fight." Taiho handed her a weapon taken from a dead Dravik. "Point this end at the enemy. Press this to fire. Stay behind me and do not stop moving." "But we will die," another crew member said. "Maybe," Taiho agreed. "But if you stay here, you will definitely die. So you might as well try." He turned and walked out of the room. After a moment, the 6 Valoran followed him. Yura watched the human lead her crew through the ship. He moved carefully, checking corners, listening for sounds. When Dravik appeared, he fought them. When the way was clear, he moved fast. He was bleeding badly now. The wound on his ribs had opened further. His uniform was soaked through with red. His face was pale, but he did not stop. How is he still standing? Kieran asked. Yura remembered what Taiho had said in the cargo bay. When you have something worth protecting, pain becomes just another obstacle. She had called it propaganda. Pretty words that meant nothing. Now she watched those words become real. She watched a wounded human refuse to fall. She watched him fight through pain that should have dropped him unconscious. She watched him protect her crew with nothing but will and stolen weapons. And for the first time in 40 years of command, Commander Yura did not know what to think. The next hour was the longest of Yura's life. She sat on the bridge of her crippled ship, watching through flickering camera feeds as one human changed everything. The power was still down. Communications were still dead. Half her crew was dead or captured. And somewhere in the dark corridors of the Starlight Mind, Taiho was still fighting. He had gathered 11 survivors now. Valoran engineers, technicians, and low-ranking officers who had never held a weapon before. He led them through the ship like a shepherd protecting a flock from wolves. The Dravik were everywhere. They moved in packs of 3 or 4, hunting through the corridors for anyone still alive. When they found victims, they did not kill them quickly. The screams that came through the audio feeds would haunt Yura for the rest of her life, but something strange was happening. The Dravik were starting to change their behavior. At first, they had moved through the ship with confidence. They knew they had superior numbers. They knew the Valoran were not fighters. They expected easy prey. Now they were careful. They checked corners before turning them. They moved slower. They stayed in larger groups. They were afraid. Yura watched one group of 5 Dravik approach a junction where Taiho had set up a position. He was hiding behind a barricade made of broken furniture and storage containers. His 11 Valoran were with him, holding Dravik weapons with shaking hands. "When they come," Taiho said quietly, "aim for the joints and the throat. Nowhere else. The armor is too thick everywhere else." "I cannot do this," one of the Valoran whispered. His name was Baro. He was a navigation technician who had never seen combat. "I am not a soldier." Neither am I, Taiho said. Baro looked at him with confusion. But you fight like a demon. You have killed many of them. I was a farmer's son, Taiho said. I grew rice and vegetables. I did not touch a weapon until I was 22 years old. He checked his blade, testing the edge with his thumb. Humans do not become soldiers because we are born for war. We become soldiers because someone needs protecting. But you are wounded. You can barely stand. Taiho looked down at himself. The wound on his ribs had been wrapped with torn cloth, but blood was still seeping through. His left arm hung at a strange angle, probably broken. The cut on his leg had been tied with a strip of uniform fabric. I can still hold a weapon, he said. So I can still fight. The Dravik appeared at the end of the corridor. 5 of them, moving in formation, their blades ready. Now, Taiho said calmly. The Valoran fired. Their aim was bad. Most of the shots missed or hit armor, but 2 found their marks. One Dravik fell with a smoking hole in its knee. Another stumbled back with a wound in its neck. Taiho charged. He should not have been able to run. His leg wound alone should have made it impossible. But he ran anyway, his blade raised, a sound coming from his throat that was not quite a scream and not quite a roar. He hit the Dravik line like a storm. The first one died before it knew he was there. The second turned to face him, and Taiho ducked under its swing and drove his blade up into the gap under its arm. The third grabbed him with 2 of its limbs and threw him against the wall. Yura heard something crack. It might have been the wall. It might have been Taiho's ribs. He landed hard and rolled. The Dravik came for him with its blade raised. Taiho grabbed a piece of broken metal from the floor and threw it. The metal hit the creature in the face, making it flinch for just a moment. That moment was enough. Taiho was on his feet again, moving inside the Dravik's guard. His blade found the creature's throat. 2 Dravik left. They looked at each other. Then they looked at the 5 dead bodies on the floor. Then they looked at the human standing among those bodies, covered in blood, barely able to stand, but still holding his weapon. They ran. Yura could not believe what she was seeing. Dravik did not run. They were predators. They hunted and killed. They did not flee from wounded prey, but they fled from Taiho. The human watched them go. Then his legs gave out and he fell to his knees. Pyrrha ran to him. You need medical attention. You are dying. Not yet, Taiho said. He took a deep breath that made him wince with pain. We need to reach the engineering deck. If we can restore partial power, we can send a distress signal. The engineering deck is on the other side of the ship. There will be more of them. Yes. You cannot fight anymore. You can barely move. Taiho looked up at her. His eyes were clouded with pain, but something burned behind them. Something that would not give up. I can move, so I can fight. Help me stand. Pyrrha helped him to his feet. He swayed but did not fall. He picked up his blade and started walking. The 11 Valoran followed him, on the bridge. Yura watched them move through the ship. She watched Taiho stop to rest against walls when he thought no one was looking. She watched him straighten up whenever the Valoran looked at him. She watched him refuse to show weakness to the people counting on him. They encountered 2 more groups of Dravik. The first group had only 3 raiders. They died quickly. The second group had 7. 7 Dravik against 1 wounded human and 11 untrained. Valoran. Taiho told his group to fall back around a corner. He stood alone in the corridor, blocking the way. Come on, he said to the Dravik. They came. What happened next was not a battle. It was something else. Something older. Something that Yura had only read about in ancient texts from species long dead. Taiho fought like he had nothing to lose. He took wounds that should have killed him. A blade through his shoulder. Claws across his back. something sharp that opened his forearm to the bone. He kept fighting. He killed 3 of them before the Valoran found their courage. They came around the corner, firing their weapons, screaming in voices that cracked with terror. Their shots were wild and desperate, but there were enough of them to matter. 2 more Dravik fell. The last 2 tried to retreat. Taiho did not let them. He chased them, limping, bleeding, holding a blade in his good hand. He caught them. When he came back, he was dragging one leg behind him. His left arm was completely useless now. Blood dripped from too many wounds to count, but he was smiling. "Engineering deck is clear," he said. "Let us go restore power." Pyrrha was crying. How? How are you still alive?" Taiho's smile faded. He looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. "Because you need me to be," he said simply. "When this is over, I can rest. But not yet. Not until you are safe." They reached the engineering deck. One of the Valoran, a senior technician named Hani, began working on the power systems. The others set up a defensive position at the door. Taiho sat down against a console, finally allowing himself to stop. His breathing was shallow and fast. His skin was gray. Yura spoke into the internal communicator, hoping it would reach them. "This is Commander Yura. Can anyone hear me?" Static. Then Pyrrha's voice came through, weak but clear. "Commander? We are alive. We are in engineering. Taiho, the human. He saved us." "I know," Yura said. "I watched. I saw everything." There was a pause. Then Pyrrha said something that Yura would remember for the rest of her life. "Commander, the legends about humans. They are true. All of them. Maybe they do not tell the whole truth. Maybe the truth is worse. This man should have died 10 times tonight. But he would not let himself die. Because we needed him." On the camera feed, Yura watched Taiho slump against the console. His eyes were closed. His chest was barely moving, but his hand still held his weapon. Even unconscious, he would not let go. Power came back in pieces. First the lights, then the computers, then, finally, the communications. Yura sent the distress signal herself. Her voice was calm and professional, the voice of a commander who had seen everything and was ready for anything. But her hand shook as she spoke. "This is Commander Yura of the Valoran cruiser Starlight Mind. We have been attacked by Dravik raiders. We have multiple casualties and significant damage. Requesting immediate assistance." The response came within minutes. 3 coalition warships were already on their way. The Dravik, seeing the incoming fleet on their sensors, retreated into the asteroid field. They had lost too many warriors tonight. Even raiders knew when to cut their losses. Yra left the bridge for the first time since the attack began. She walked through the corridors of her broken ship, stepping over debris and bodies. The emergency lights cast everything in harsh shadows. She passed crew members who were tending to the wounded. She passed others who were collecting the dead. She saw faces she recognized and faces she would never see alive again. Finally, she reached the engineering deck. The door was open. Inside, the 11 survivors sat or stood in silence. Some were crying quietly. Others simply stared at nothing, their minds still trying to understand what they had lived through. In the center of the room, surrounded by medical personnel, lay Taiho. He was not moving. Yura pushed through the crowd and looked down at him. His uniform had been cut away, revealing the true extent of his wounds. She counted them without wanting to. The gash across his ribs that went down to the bone. The puncture wound through his shoulder. The deep cuts on his arms and legs. The bruises that covered his body like dark flowers. His skin was white as paper. His breathing was so shallow she could barely see his chest move. "Is he alive?" Yura asked. The lead medic, a Valoran named Sori, looked up with exhaustion in her eyes. Barely. He has lost more blood than should be possible to lose and still survive. He has 3 broken ribs. His left arm is fractured in 2 places. One of his lungs is damaged. His leg has a wound that went almost to the bone. She paused and shook her head. By all medical understanding, he should have died an hour ago. 2 hours ago. I do not know how he kept moving. Will he live? Sori hesitated. I do not know. His body is failing. His heart keeps trying to stop. We have restarted it twice already. Twice. His heart had stopped twice, and he was still here. Yura looked at the human's face. Even unconscious, there was something hard in his expression. Something that refused to quit. Do whatever you must to save him, she said. Use every resource we have. This man saved my crew. I will not let him die on my ship. The medical team worked for hours. They gave him blood from the emergency supplies meant for Valoran, modified to work with human biology. They sealed his wounds with emergency foam and stitched the deepest cuts by hand. They pumped his chest when his heart stopped a 3rd time. Each time, it started again. Yura stayed in the engineering deck, watching. She did not leave even when the rescue ships arrived. She did not leave when other officers came to give reports and ask questions. She stood there, watching this human fight death itself. At some point, Pyrrha came to stand beside her. Commander, the young engineer said, may I speak freely? Yes. In the briefing room, you said the legends about humans were lies. You said they were fragile and emotional and weak. Yura said nothing. She remembered every word she had spoken. They tasted like ash in her mouth now. I believed you, Pyrrha continued. I thought humans were nothing special. When the attack began, I expected the human liaison to hide like the rest of us, or to die quickly because he was not built for war. She looked at Taiho's broken body. I was wrong. We were all wrong. Yes, Yura said quietly. We were. He told me something before we reached engineering. I asked him why humans fight so hard. Why they do not give up even when giving up would be easier. What did he say? Pyrrha's voice trembled. He said that every human knows they are going to die someday. They are born knowing it. They grow up with death waiting for them. So they learn to ignore it. They learn to keep moving forward because standing still means giving death permission to take them early. She wiped her eyes. He said that humans do not fight because they think they can win. They fight because fighting is better than giving up. They fight because the act of fighting is the point. Even if they lose, they want death to earn its victory. Yura thought about this for a long time. She had lived for over 200 years. Her species could live for 300 more if they were careful. Death was a distant thing for Valoran, something that happened to old people or unfortunate people, not something that touched daily life. Humans lived for less than a century. Their whole existence was a race against time. Every moment mattered to them because they had so few moments. Maybe that was why they fought so hard. When you only have a little, you protect it with everything you have. The hours passed. The medical team worked. Taiho's heart stopped 2 more times and was restarted 2 more times. His body kept failing, and he kept refusing to let it. Finally, as the first light of the artificial morning cycle filled the ship, Sori stepped back from the medical bed. He is stable, she said, her voice thick with disbelief. Somehow, against everything I know about biology and medicine, he is stable. He will need weeks of recovery, maybe months, but he will live. Yura let out a breath she did not know she was holding. Can I speak to him? He is unconscious. He will be for some time, but... Sori hesitated. His eyes moved when you spoke. I think he can hear you. Yura moved closer to the bed. She looked down at the human who had saved 11 of her crew, who had killed 23 Dravik raiders, who had fought through wounds that should have killed him 5 times over. "Liaison Officer Taiho," she said formally, "I owe you an apology. And a debt." His eyes moved beneath his closed lids. "I called your people weak. I called your legends lies. I was arrogant and blind." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "What I saw tonight was not weakness. It was the opposite of weakness. It was something I do not have a word for in my language." She reached down and carefully touched his scarred hand. "When you wake up, we will talk. I have questions. Many questions. But for now, rest. You have earned it." She stood there for another moment, then turned and walked away. There was much to do. Reports to file. Casualties to count. A damaged ship to repair. But as she walked through the corridors of the Starlight Mind, Commander Yura carried something new in her chest. It might have been respect. It might have been wonder. It might have been the first stirrings of a legend she would tell for the rest of her long life. 3 months passed. The Starlight Mine had been repaired and returned to service. The dead had been mourned. The wounded had healed. Life in the Coalition fleet continued as it always did, but something had changed. The story of that night spread through the fleet like fire. First it was whispered among the crew of the Starlight Mind. Then it reached other ships. Then other species. Within weeks, everyone had heard about the human liaison officer who killed 23 Dravik with improvised weapons and a broken body. Some said he killed 30. Others said 50. The numbers grew with each telling, just as Yura had once said they would. But this time, she knew the truth was remarkable enough. Taiho spent 2 months in the medical center. His body healed slowly. The wounds left scars that would never fade. His left arm would never be quite as strong as before. He walked with a slight limp now, a reminder of the night he refused to die. When he was finally cleared for duty, Yura made a personal request to Coalition Command. She asked for Taiho to be assigned to her ship permanently, not as a liaison hidden in cargo bays, but as a full member of her command staff. The request was approved. On the day Taiho returned to the Starlight Mind, the crew lined the corridors to watch him walk past. They did not cheer or applaud. That was not the Valoran way. But they stood in silence, their eyes following him, their postures showing a respect that words could not express. Taiho walked through them with his head down, looking uncomfortable with the attention. He was the same quiet man who had sat in a briefing room all those months ago. The same calm face, the same gentle voice, but now everyone knew what he was capable of. Yura met him at the entrance to the bridge. She had prepared a speech, but when she saw him, the words disappeared. "Welcome back," she said simply. "Thank you, Commander." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Yura gestured toward the door. "Come. There is a briefing starting soon. I would value your perspective." The briefing room was the same as before. The same curved table. The same blue lights. The same screens on the walls. Officers from different species sat in their usual places. But when Taiho entered, everyone stopped talking. Every eye turned to look at him. He took a seat near Yura, not in the corner where he had sat before. No one questioned this. No one suggested he belonged anywhere else. The briefing began. Standard topics. Fleet movements. Patrol routes. Nothing unusual. Then, a young officer from the Crick species spoke up. He was new to the fleet, assigned just weeks ago. He had heard the stories, but did not quite believe them. "I have reviewed the combat records from various species," he said, clicking his mandibles nervously. "Human effectiveness seems greatly exaggerated in reports. Their physical capabilities are below average for most sentient species. I suggest we reduce our reliance on human forces in combat situations." The room went very still. The young Cricks looked around, confused by the silence. He did not understand why the other officers were looking at him with what might have been pity. Ira leaned forward. "Lieutenant, have you read the reports from the Starlight Mine incident?" "I have seen summaries." "A Dravik raid that was successfully repelled." "Successfully repelled." Ira let the words hang in the air. "That is one way to describe it." She stood up and walked to the center of the room, just as she had done months ago. But this time, her voice carried something different. Not arrogance, understanding. "I stood in this room not long ago and said things very similar to what you just said. I called humans fragile. I called their legends propaganda. I assigned the human liaison officer to cargo inventory because I thought he was useless." She turned to look at Taiho. "Then I watched that same human kill 23 Dravik raiders. I watched him fight with broken bones and bleeding wounds. I watched him refuse to die because 11 of my crew members needed him to stay alive. I watched him lead untrained engineers through a combat zone and bring them out the other side without losing a single one." The young Crix had gone very still. "The legends are not exaggerated," Ira said. "If anything, they are too modest. Humans do not win battles because they are stronger or faster. They win because they do not know how to give up. They win because surrender is not part of their nature. They win because when everything is lost and everyone else has stopped fighting, they are still standing." She looked around the room at the other officers. "I have commanded ships for 40 years. I have seen many species fight in many wars. I have never seen anything like what humans can do when their backs are against the wall. And I hope none of you ever have to learn this lesson the way I did." The young Crix lowered his head. "I apologize, Commander. I spoke without understanding. You spoke as I once spoke. Learn from my mistake." Taiho had said nothing during this exchange. He sat quietly, his scarred hands folded on the table. His expression calmed out after the briefing. Ira asked him to stay behind. "You did not need to say all that," Taiho said when they were alone. "Yes, I did." Ira moved to stand near the window that looked out at the stars. "I was wrong about humans. I was wrong about you. It is important that others do not make the same mistake. We are just people. We are not legends." Ira turned to look at him. "That is exactly what makes you legendary. You do extraordinary things while believing you are ordinary. You face death while knowing you will die. You fight impossible battles while expecting to lose." She shook her head slowly. "Most species would call that foolishness. But I have seen what it produces. I have seen what happens when someone simply refuses to fall down." Taiho was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "Do you still think pain is just words?" Ira remembered the cargo bay. She remembered what Taiho had said to the crew member who asked about human pain. When you have something worth protecting, pain becomes just another obstacle. "No," she said. "I understand now. Pain is real. Fear is real. Humans feel these things just as intensely as any other species. But you have learned to keep moving anyway. You have made a choice that most species never make." "What choice is that?" "To fight even when fighting is irrational. To hope even when hope is gone. To protect others, even when it will cost you everything." Ira paused. "That is not weakness, Taiho. That is the greatest strength I have ever witnessed." Taiho stood and walked to the window beside her. They looked out at the stars together. "In human stories," he said quietly, "we have a word for people who fight when all hope is lost. We call them heroes. What makes someone a hero? Ordinary people who refuse to stay down. That is all. People who see something worth protecting and decide that their own lives matter less than that thing." He looked at his scarred hands. "I am not a hero. I am just someone who does not know how to quit." Ira almost smiled. That is exactly what a hero would say. In the weeks that followed, The story of the Battle of Cargo Bay 7 spread across the galaxy. It was told in military academies and barracks. It was discussed in strategy meetings and diplomatic sessions. It became one more legend added to the long list of human legends. And somewhere, in mess halls and training rooms across 100 worlds, young soldiers learned the same lesson that Commander Yura had learned: never corner a human. Never assume they will give up. Never think that wounds or pain or impossible odds will make them stop. Because humans do not stop. They cannot stop when the people behind them are counting on them. Humans will crawl through hell on broken hands if they have to. That is not exaggeration. That is not propaganda. That is just who they are. And that is why the galaxy learned to respect this short-lived, soft-skinned species from a single blue planet on the edge of nowhere. Because legends, it turned out, were not born from strength alone. They were born from the refusal to surrender. And no species in the galaxy refused harder than humans.